A regiment of Rolls Royces and people sitting around with chicken and champagne can only mean one thing. The first Tuesday in November. The place? The members' car park at Flemington. The occasion? The Melbourne Cup. Bring the butler and the silver service and you go up 10 points. All this is an upmarket nod at the picnic races which started here back in the 1860s. However, you can hire all this gear these days, so you may be casting envious glances at a bloke who won the day out in a raffle. So what? Everyone and his mate is here on Cup Day. It seems that if you've bottled up that urge to dress up and let it go, this is the day to do it. The diverse elements that go to make up this town come together for a few hours at Flemington, from the sublime to the God blimey. Oh, yes, there's also a horse race. The greatest horse race in the nation. When it starts, Australia stops. From Adelaide to Alice Springs, from Sassafras to Sydney.
My blue denim is flying on the outside. My blue denim won't make it.
It all began with gold. A find of precious yellow metal, one of the biggest in history, converted a sleepy wool town into a seething port within months. The roaring days had begun. Immigrants flooded in from Europe, America, and China. Crews deserted their ships, and the homes of the squatters were bereft of servants. Fortunes were made overnight, none more often than by those astute individuals, the merchants of Melbourne. They found their gold too by supplying pots and pans and French champagne to the diggers. The gold flowed back through the town, of course, where the bankers were only too pleased to handle it. Other champions of free enterprise discovered that by making pots and pans and shovels, they too could get their share of what was going. So within a decade were laid the foundations of the great banks, merchant houses, and manufacturing. It has often been noted that those who accumulate embarrassingly large amounts of money by whatever means often yearn for respectability, and none more so than those gentlemen. But their accumulations were Melbourne's dispensation, for respectability is more easily projected in visible forms like buildings. So, up went the mansions and the churches. And what builders they were. A public library dome bigger than the British Museum, planned in 1854. An exhibition building to exhibit the wonders of 19th century manufacturing in the 1870s. Move over London. These men were no small-time operators, but dreamers, brave and bold. We'll have a Parliament House, and there it was. A cross between a Greek temple and a king's palace. It was started in 1856. The Legislative Council chambers were finished in just 18 months. Modern builders, please note. Marvellous Melbourne, they called it. And it was, particularly when you consider all this building was undertaken just 20 years after the first tent was pitched on the banks of the Yarra. This self-confidence, this eye for the future, this need to put down roots in a hurry is still hard for the modern mind to grasp. Imagine if you were aged 10 when you stepped ashore on the Yarra Bank in 1835 and saw only tents. By the time you were 40, you would have been living in a modern city. This boom left Melbourne as one of the great Victorian cities of the world. In an age of land boomers, the giant amongst them was a gentleman who went by the unfortunate name of Tommy Bent. To him we owe the development of Brighton and its hinterland. Amongst others, dedicated to the pursuit of windfall profits, he was, in due course, elected to Parliament, thus controlling the money flow from both ends, as it were. Today, his statue poses the question to eternity. Want to buy a suburb? Well, what about a railway? His best friend was Judge Barry, the man who hanged Ned Kelly. Of such ironies is our history made. However, the thrill of the chase after the elusive dollar has not departed with Tommy Bent's shade, and can be seen in frenzied form in the stock exchange. In other sorts of stock auctions. More decorously, in art auctions.
The Major Street, $37,500. $37,500.
I know it's not your bid, madam. I can see that. How could you? 470.
But most colourfully of all, in that unique Melbourne street theatre, the Saturday house auction.
So don't hold back thinking that I'm going to talk to the vendor. First call at $150,000. 155, 160, 160, I'm in
Another
now.
sort of buying and selling, though hardly street theatre, takes place mainly after dark at a number of exotically named establishments. This particular collection, some 40 strong, is in St Kilda Road. This is another Melbourne tradition which goes back a long way to those pleasure domes handily situated around the corner from Parliament House last century. The profession is a little more dispersed nowadays. Nearby, the heart of St Kilda provides continuous employment for all sorts of people. Among them, Sunday journalists and TV pundits who, if believed, would have it placed somewhere to the left of Sodom and Gomorrah. The truth is a little more complex. It's an area of contrast, of street markets and dark corners, of weirdos and trendies, of fast food outlets and top restaurants. But above all, it's alive 24 hours a day. Its Ackland Street must contain the highest concentration of food anywhere. The original Jewish delis and cake shops established in the 30s have been joined by just about every other type of cuisine. The old city fathers, while they knew how to spend a quid, also cultivated the proper attitude towards money. It surpassed veneration and approached the reverential, as you can tell by the banks they left behind. Temples and cathedrals to the celebration of lots of lovely cash. Not that Collins Street has changed that much. I'm sure that heartbeats still quicken to the tinkle of gold, but these modern glass walls suggest a certain reticence which our ancestors never had. But then business is a serious business, and behind these windows are the inner sanctums of the largest companies in the land, whose decisions affect the lives and prosperity of far more Australians than we're generally aware of. Despite the multi-storied intrusions, the atmosphere of the eastern end of Collins Street survives. And nowhere better than in those Victorian arcades with their rows of shops which induce the feeling of having stepped back a century. aren't the cheapest shops of the country, but definitely the place to go for the man who has everything. Not all the new developments are as austere as the glass and concrete exteriors would suggest, like the new Wentworth Centre. Over the road, there is one property which will never be redeveloped this side of the Second Coming. The Melbourne Club. The inner sanctum.
Thanks, Les.
On the subject of Rolls Royces, we've discovered where they go to breed. There's a leafy hill a couple of miles from the city at a place called Toorak. It is here the social elite are reputed to live. This contention is certainly supported by the visual evidence on display, but it must be said that as a species, they're about as hard to see as the night parrot. Unlike the parrot, they're in no danger of extinction, but perhaps their habits are just as nocturnal. You may just catch a glimpse of them in the Rolls on their way to the gourmet shops or the seaside. Or perhaps that's one. The muscular part of the town is the port of Melbourne. Tucked away on the lower reaches of the River Yarra, its miles of docks are little known to all but the most adventurous sightseer. It's the most modern port in the country and connects Melbourne, as it's always done, to the Seven Seas. Ships still tie up within a stone's throw of the business district. At the mouth of the river, Port Phillip Bay, Melbourne's southern gateway, spreads out. It's a place where that strange breed of people, yachties, gather in large numbers all year round. This long and wide stretch of water is ideal for indulging their passion, racing. Someone once remarked that watching yacht racing was like watching the grass grow, but not when you're close up to a bunch of elegant Admiral's Cup contenders fighting it out with finely tuned aggression. At the other end of the scale, the competition is less intense, and there are other incentives than merely getting splashed with salt water. Though why they have to mill about in the one spot when they've got 40 miles of bay, only the yachty can answer. There's another type of frenetic activity to be seen here, and these characters make full use of the elbow room that the bay provides. The bay is ringed by beaches which stretch outward from the inner city areas. Many of them will reward the avid sightseer in a number of ways. By 1890, you could get to most of the new suburbs by cable tram. This marvelous invention rocketed you round town at speeds of up to 15 miles an hour. There were unprecedented views from the front as well as blasts of fresh air. Riding in the back car was good training for buck jumping. At this time, the system was carrying 45 million passengers a year and getting the workman to his factory for tuppence for 5 miles. Alas, the last of the cable network was broken up in the 1940s. But fortunately, the electric network survived the assault of the motorists, and Melbourne is still Melbourne. The cheapest trips around are still tram rides. For instance, on one of these newfangled orange ones. The mind reels at devices like automatic doors and air conditioning. Or maybe take one of the old green ones down Swanston Street and St Kilda Road. Swanston Street is overlooked by a well-known brewery at one end and the shrine at the other. In between, there's just about everything else. It's not what you'd call a smart street, but it's never dull. Crossing Swanston Street in the very heart of the city is Burke Street, the main shopping area with 1,000 shops and stores. And when they built the Mall here, it brought out of hiding a species that was believed extinct. The busker. Some of the faces date back to the golden age of busking, the Depression years. On the other hand, there's no shortage of up-and-coming talent. Where Swanson Street crosses Flinders, there are three well-known Melbourne monuments. St Paul's Cathedral on one corner, and one of Ned Kelly's stopping places on the other, Young and Jackson's pub. Across the way is a witness to much history, Flinders Street Station. Today, they are recreating the intersection as it was in the 20s for a feature film about a homegrown rogue, Squizzy Taylor. Squizzy had a try at running the underworld of his day. Sad to say, unlike many rogues in Melbourne's past, he was unlucky, and instead of getting knighted, he got shot. Australians in general, and Melburnians in particular, are not noted for overpraising their political leaders. But when you look at the grand boulevards like St Kilda Road, kind words must be said for some of them. Among them, the first governor, Latrobe, who fought the early developers to maintain the ring of green spaces, which is a joy for all future generations. At the beginning of the road is the National Gallery of Victoria, which houses the nation's greatest art collection. On the high hill of the King's Domain is the Shrine of Remembrance, erected as a reminder of the terrible casualties of the First World War. And behind it, Government House. So extensive are these parks that even the locals can still find unfamiliar nooks and crannies. Bushrangers plied their trade along this road in the 1850s, and for those interested in continuity, many of these buildings are occupied these days by advertising agencies. Perhaps the most concise expression of the climate here is the Botanical Gardens. This classical Georgian design beguiles the eye at every turn. Where you'll find European trees, subtropical palms, and native flora, all rubbing shoulders in the same acres. The lakes are formed from old billabongs of the Yarra, and here stands an ancient river red gum, where it's recorded jubilant citizenry gathered on the occasion in 1850 of Victoria's separation from New South Wales. The banks of the Yarra River on a balmy day offer an object lesson in just how many ways the human body can absorb punishment. However, whatever method they choose, everyone seems to enjoy it. Well, most of them. Just how often a jogger's determination fails when he passes the parties at the riverside barbecues is a matter of conjecture. Still, if you like doing it, you could choose a worse place. Victoria Market, 100 years on, still holds its place in the heart of town as the greatest city market in Australia. Maybe that's a miracle, because the central city markets of so many great cities of the world have lost out to developers. But this market, together with Paran and South Melbourne, holds a special place in the hearts of the people of Melbourne. If you like air conditioning, fluoros and computerized cash registers, this is not your cup of tea. If you like colour, people, produce and value for money, then come on down. The markets are as much a part of this town as Footy and Flemington. And besides, you never know who you'll run into. The old Victorians must have been a thirsty crew, since in the city and the inner suburbs, there was a pub on just about every corner. They come in all shapes and sizes and cater for all types and characters.
So, always with plenty of power.
Because Australia, it's been real good to me. I can't come. I'll tell you in a minute. Well, here we are in Melbourne, Australia, right? What's a wonderful place. Sun is shining all of the time. Well, we don't care about the weather because it brings everyone together. Well, inside you're drinking the beer. Italian people over there drinking, eating the spaghetti, drinking the wine. And there's the Greek guy. What are you doing in here? He's eating the souvlaki. What did you get there? Got one? Shut up. Okay, then we got the Yugoslavs and the Collingwood people. All kinds of ethnic groups. Having a good time. Sing it. Don't ever say.
In Melbourne, the pub has remained the focal point for meeting friends. G'day, Bob. Talking business, and above all, eating. Competition is intense, and the customer reaps the benefits. In these places, you can get some of the best cheap meals in the world. Traditional, French, Italian, Chinese, it's all there. And in style, they range from tip-top trendy to down to bloody earth. Since the 1960s, the pubs have played another role in fostering Melbourne as the centre of the rock scene in Australia. Managements discovered customers wanted to hear the new style, and so began a tempestuous relationship between them and the groups. Struggling bands were able to get work, even if the boss did try to turn down the amps. And they were able to play for a live audience, and the audiences kept coming back. Today, there's over 100 pub venues all over the city. The love affair goes on and makes Melbourne the most accessible city in the world for listening to rock in all its moods. And for lovers of late nights, bright lights and cocktails, Melbourne After Dark is a world of night spots, discos and dancing. Well then, if you add the restaurants in town to the pubs, you'd think that maybe the population spends their spare time exercising its eating gear. Come to think of it, that's not such a bad way to go. There are 23 pages of restaurants in the Melbourne Yellow Pages. This gastronomic explosion came in the wake of the European migrants at the end of the war. They, led by the Italians, provided the love of food, and the locals contributed the pangs of hunger and adventurous palates. There were, of course, grand old restaurants before then, but hardly on every second corner as now. The BYO place began here and has helped in the establishment of 100 small, highly individual places where prices are reasonable. At the other end are the internationally known three-star places. Your qualifications to enter these are the same as the others, to enjoy food, but you'll need a fatter wallet. Enjoy, enjoy, the best tucky you can get in the land. And while on the subject, there's been an interesting development going on quietly here since the early 70s.
My name's Toledo, with an emphasis on blade.
That's the growth of theatre restaurant.
I like to slice and slash. They call me the Marquis de Sade.
Consisting of original cabaret, vaudeville, drama, and even circuses. It's unique and therefore hard to describe. It's being exported now to other states and Europe.
Mein Name ist Herr Dr. Gunther Schnapp.
It's something you've got to see for yourself. If it resembles anything at all, it's the Berlin satiric cabaret of the early 30s.
Cut that job with me.
Listen,
you
man,
gotta
can't
do
do
it.
these kind of
Simple
things
as
if
that.
it's not
He's
fair.
gotta do it.
Hey,
Hey, it's the Broad. The Broad.
There's also plenty of the more traditional restaurant music halls, places that have been playing to packed houses for 20 years.
They long for the old days to take time way back when we'll walk up the avenue till we're there.
Melbourne's legitimate theatre tradition goes back a long way to the great impresarios. As a consequence, the city is rich in theatres, whether for plays, musicals, or opera. As for opera, Madame Melba, that homegrown prima donna, glances down imperiously from her perch in the National Gallery, just to make sure the latter-day stars keep the standard up. During the 80s, the huge arts centre complex will gradually become the focal point for the performing arts. Burke and Wills, those intrepid explorers of bygone days, somewhat surprised, looked down on the city square and not Cooper's Creek. They needn't worry. It took longer for the city fathers to build this than it took for the explorers to get lost in the great outback. If municipal speeches had been bricks and mortar, they would have built St. Peter's Rome here. The square is a little more modest than that, but interesting nonetheless. People think so anyway because they keep coming here in droves. Melbourne loves a parade, and autumn is the time when most of the town turns out for one. Sometimes it seems that at least one half's in the procession while the other half watches. Just getting the thing assembled takes up 10 city blocks. Who'd want to be a marshal? The once-a-year clowns, circus acts, and pretty girls are all there. And the longest Chinese dragon in the world. If anyone has any doubt that Melbourne's a huge melting pot, just bring them along here. They call it Moomba. It's not an arts festival or a culture cram. The accent has always been on people getting together and having fun. And for a week, they do just that. Melbourne plays host to most of the great sporting events in Australia. The Australian Open tennis, final leg of the International Grand Slam, is held here every year on the grass at Cougar. The Melbourne cricket ground has been witness to some of the most exciting clashes the game has ever seen. And if golf's your bag, watch them drive on some of the greenest turfs this side of Ireland. As diverse and as many-sided as Melburnians may be, there is one matter on which they stand shoulder to shoulder. There's a slander put about that the townsfolk are football fanatics. This, of course, is a gross inaccuracy. There are actually people who take no interest in the game, though no one's ever met them. If we elevate leading players and coaches to the status of demigods, then this is only due recognition of the heroic nature of the contest. If the nation's leaders queue to shake their hands, then it simply shows they have a proper sense of the natural order of things. If some citizens regard summer as a bothersome interval between footy seasons, then this merely demonstrates the respect due to the great Australian game invented here 130 years ago. The season culminates in the grand final. A family affair shared between 120,000 spectators and millions of televiewers throughout the world.
Mm-hmm.